and really just having someone to bounce off, someone to say, yeah, that's okay, that sounds tough. Like sometimes you just want acknowledgement as well.
So today I'm with Louise Azzopardi, who is a life coach, mentor and keynote speaker and industry ambassador for everything ag and sports turf and mechanics. That's sort of a bit of your background, but we'll go into that in a second. But before we start, I just want to talk about a little snippet I took from your website, which was I thought was quite interesting and sort of paves the way for this podcast, really. It says, her journey through the trades is what led her to become a coach. After experiencing a roller coaster of being a woman in a male-dominated trade, feeling like no one understood what she was going through, she wanted to make sure that no one else felt that way. And I think that pretty much sums up with Louise. So with that, Louise, would you like to give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I am currently a life coach and mentor for tradeswomen and tradies. I started off my career as a heavy vehicle mechanic. So I left school quite young. I was 15 when I left school and started my apprenticeship as a mechanic. And I found getting into my apprenticeship, I didn't have too many hurdles. I ended up attending a careers expo where I met Sarah, who was a first year heavy vehicle mechanic at the time. And she encouraged me to do work experience at her work, and I loved it. And I decided to apply for a job there. The path that set me on mechanics was that I grew up on a farm. So my parents grow tomatoes in greenhouses, so they do semi-hydroponics. And I was always working with my hands, either fixing farm machinery or picking and packing vegetables, like dealing with crops and that kind of thing. So I love working with my hands. And then that kind of was like, okay, what am I going to do? I don't want to study at university. I don't want to do senior high school, so I got to find something. So that's when I went into looking at becoming a mechanic, meeting Sarah, starting up the apprenticeship, which was like, a roller coaster, like I said on the website. But overall, it was an amazing experience. Like, I loved the work, being on the tools. I loved being able to repair machines and just like building my knowledge. And for me, it was a lot of like, my mind was occupied with the science, with the diagnostics, and I could also use my body to, physically do the repairs. So I was like happy in both sense there. From there, I did my apprenticeship on road transport trucks at Cummins. And after I did my apprenticeship, I went and worked on farms. So some of them were turf farms as well. There we had the tree bros and like all that kind of stuff, like the automatic turf harvesters. They were a mission. I never really got my head fully around it. I wasn't there for too long, and we had some specialized guys on there. But I got to play around with them a little bit. Pretty much when we were working on the farms, we were fixing anything that moved or should have moved. So we were doing like the road transport trucks, which is what I was like trained on, but also pumps and irrigators and ag equipment, the cars, anything that was on the farm, we'd work on it. Then from there, I ended up becoming a trainer and assessor, so a technical teacher. And I was working for West Track, so our local Caterpillar dealer. And when I was like teaching apprentices, I was always like kind of helping them with the softer side of things first, like, any issues that they were kind of having at home that was distracting them from learning, any issues that they were having, say, with their supervisor, because so much of an apprenticeship is learning in the workplace, and the work that we do in the classroom is complements that. So if they're not getting that in the workplace, then you're kind of sorting that out. And I had a few female students, but really it was kind of like, I can do something more here. Like, I can really help, tradespeople in general, especially like specializing with tradeswomen, like to get over these hurdles that I see that are stopping them from really excelling in their trade or enjoying their trade. And that's when I decided to become a life coach. Well, actually, I kind of decided to start a business, and I'm like, I'm going to do something about this. And then the life coaching kind of come when I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I I'm almost finished master practitioner and life coaching qualification, so I've learnt so much that's added on to my lived experience, which then I use to. I've got a podcast as well, so I've got Anxious Tradeswoman podcast. I teach a lot of things on there. I do one-on-one coaching. I do workshops, so like professional development workshops, as well as keynote speaking on the topic of, mostly tradeswomen, but then I talk about tradies in general, and then the apprentice area as well, specializing in talking specifically on some of the issues that they go through.
It's very interesting, actually. So your story, although different, is sort of very similar to my own. So sort of coming through a trade, then going into education, and then setting up international greenkeepers, because we found an area of the industry which wasn't really covered properly. So with that, what sort of challenges do you think that you've picked up? And what were the worst ones that you faced during the journey, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think there was I see this a lot with like my clients as well, and everyone kind of goes through a different flavor of it, but it's like I did have some kind of sexual harassment and stuff and happened to me during my apprenticeship. So with my apprenticeship, there was about 40 of us working in the workshop. It was quite a large workspace. And over the 4.5 years that I was there were three particular people that I had issues with. All different issues, like with each of them. But what kind of happened was those incidents happened, and some of them happened over a space of a few months. But then my mental health started to suffer. So when I was struggling mentally, then with mental health, your brain tends to use whatever evidence it can against you.
Yeah.
And because I had these situations, my brain was grabbing onto them and replaying them over and over again. So it's like I had the issues, dealt with the issues externally. Everyone thought it was fine, but then I was using them against myself. How did I get myself in this position? How did I let this happen? And letting it eat away at me, causing me to be quite anxious and depressed as well. So kind of them two hand in hand, like the harassment and then the mental health, they kind of fed off each other, was probably the biggest hurdle that I had to go through.
Yeah, I found it interesting that you say it was during the apprenticeship, portion as well. That particular moment. I had a conversation recently because it's a very male dominated industry, sports turf, as you know. Whether that's even coaching all the way down to the actual maintenance of the facilities. We had a conversation with someone recently where we were talking about things like this. And actually, we sort of left the conversation at the end, and I thought, I wouldn't really be happy letting you have one of my apprentices, whether it was male or female, based on the sort of attitudes and cultures that they had within the workplace. And it was, it hit home, but from a different aspect before, because I'd never really been on the education side of things. And then actually, obviously, now a big part of their welfare is, down to me. We go out and do the checks and ensure that these students are, happy, safe, they're in a good place within the workplaces. They're there 4 or 5 days a week. They only get to spend one day or a couple of hours with us on a Monday. So I think it's really important that, we pick up on those little things as an industry, not just the people that are at the work site, but the people providing the education, the governing bodies, and pretty much just anyone around. If you see something going on or you hear something, we should be acknowledging it and then seeing what we can do to prevent it from happening, basically in the safest possible way.
Yeah, that's it. I think also the apprenticeship is a really quite a vulnerable time in a person's overall career, because you're learning off other people. You don't want to upset them or anything. So if one of the people that you are learning from is one of the perpetrators of bullying or anything like that, you don't want to say anything to them, because if you upset them, then they might not teach you.
Yeah.
As well. So there's kind of that playing on, as well as you're trying to, you might be quite young. I started my apprenticeship when I was 15. A lot of, there's more and more mature age people getting into and doing their apprenticeships, but so often they're, pre-20s, not much life experience, plus learning a whole industry at the same time. So they don't have the resilience, they don't have the life skills. Sometimes they're telling themselves, I'm so lucky to have this job, I
Yeah.
shouldn't complain, and they let things build up.
Well, that's it. And it like you say, that sort of age demographic, it tends to be below 20s. We are seeing a lot more people joining apprenticeships beyond that, but it tends to be the way into an industry, sort of from college or school. And we see it even, even at the highest end of football. Sometimes we walk away and go, "This is like, we need to do some work here. We're still a long way off." And considering it usually trickles down from the top end of sports, it can be difficult at times, but knowing that we're obviously walking down the right path is the most important thing.
Yeah, that's it.
So you mentioned having a mentor during your apprenticeship. How did your mentorship play a role in your career development?
Yeah, I think like having the mentor there, I don't think I would have finished my apprenticeship without him, to be honest. Um, Even though, so my apprenticeship, so if everyone's listening on podcasts, so you can't see me. So I'm a young white woman, and I was working in a male dominated space. My mentor was an Indian born man. So he, obviously male, but he had that kind of coming up against racism moving to another
Yeah,
country. So he understood a bit about being a minority in general. So he kind of was able to connect with me on a way that some of like my supervisors who hadn't had that background experience could, which helped me through some of the tough times that I had. And really just having someone to bounce off, someone to say, yeah, that's okay, that sounds tough. Like sometimes you just want acknowledgement as well. One thing that I find happens a lot and happened to me is that when someone may be bullying you and you say, hey, that's really upsetting me, they're like, oh, it's just a joke, get over it. Like you're
yeah,
overreacting. So having someone say, oh, that does sound really tough and like validate your feelings can make all the difference. So he did that for me as well. We're actually really, really good friends like now. So it's been 12 years and he was part of the team that employed me. So he was like formally my apprentice mentor within the company. But then he stayed my mentor and my friend, and now we're kind of colleagues. He's
yeah.
also a coach as well. So we see each other as colleagues now. We bounce off each other a lot, but for a long time, he was my mentor solely. So it makes all the difference having someone to be like, hey, this is happening. Am I going insane or not? Or how do I go through it?
Yeah, definitely. I was sort of thinking back then when you were talking about it, like about my apprenticeships and sort of, the ways and the things that that you go through and the whole you learn at the same time. And I think just having someone to say, actually, is what they said acceptable? Because we went around a lot to a lot of different clients, so it wouldn't always be the same people you're talking to. A lot of people, a lot of the clients were particularly elderly, and they'd be very set in the ways, sort of a thing. So, yeah, to be able to have somewhere outside of the workplace to go to, I think it's really important. So, what advice would you give to people that are looking for a mentor or someone to, or if they want to become a mentor, for example?
Mm. Yeah, I think like the mentoring space is just there's so many different ways you can connect with a mentor or be a mentor. There's like some organizations have formalized mentoring programs that they do offer for free, but you can put your name down to be a mentor and match up with a mentee. Also, like if you're in the position to be a mentor, kind of keeping an eye out on younger people and being like, hey, do you want to have a chat? I saw this happen, and start building that relationship. um, for the mentees as well, if there's someone that is kind of, even if it's one step ahead of you or five steps ahead of you, you can reach out to them and ask, hey, can we catch up for a coffee? I'd really love to like get to know you. Like I'm looking for a mentor. Networking events, so industry networking events are really great to meet connections that are outside your workplace as well. There's a lot of benefit for having a mentor or a mentee, like that mentor mentee relationship within the workplace, but sometimes some things you don't want, if it's about a particular person that's like a situation that's happening with a particular person at the workplace, sometimes you want to talk to someone outside
Yeah.
so then it doesn't get like spread around or used against you kind of thing. So if you want someone that's outside the workplace, going to networking events and joining industry groups really allows you to broaden your connections to find someone.
Well, that's sort of my next question then. Do you think it would be more beneficial to have someone as a mentor that's worked within the industry, or someone from outside who might not know any information about sort of the ins and outs of the job?
Yeah. So I think like going into that space of experience versus not experience, it's kind of, that's the difference between like a mentor and a coach kind of thing. So I think if you Google what is a mentor, it's like someone who's done something, who's passed that knowledge on. And if you're going out to someone who hasn't done what you've done, then it's more like, oh, they're coaching you through different situations, even though they haven't done it. Both are very valuable. So that's kind of why I call myself a mentor and a coach, because if I'm working with tradeswomen, like I have been where they've been, but with coaching, you're trying to get them to come up with the answers themselves.
This is brilliant.
So,
Even I'm learning today.
yeah, so they are different, but yeah, they're both so valuable.
Oh, fantastic. So these next few topics, we do, well, I'll say a bit of a rapid fire, but we're going to change in between a couple of different topics. So the idea of the podcast today is obviously to talk with you, but also to signpost towards the services that you can offer. So, which I think is really important, because I'm no expert in this sort of stuff. We can have this conversation, but ultimately we'd like people to come and reach out to you and sort of say, you know, we've got X, Y, and Z, can you help with this? So the next topic I want to talk about, as we touched on it a little bit earlier, was breaking gender barriers. So as the first female to receive a gold medal in the heavy vehicle mechanics category, what was it like breaking the gender barriers in your industry, and how did you deal with the stereotypes and the biases?
Yeah, so there's like a few different things. Like for me, going up through the world skills competition, it was, for me, I was quite young, so I wasn't really like super aware of things that were going on. And like when I look back at it and when I talk about it, like often I just think to myself, like, you know, the way that I was thinking about it was like, where were all the other girls? Like,
Yeah.
where are they? What's happening here?
Yeah.
So now that I've like grown from that and like looking back on it, and I could like analyze it on a different level. But when I was going through it, I was like, where is everyone else? Why am I the only one here?
Yeah.
With that, but going through, there was, I like to say like 95% of people are really accepting of having women in the workplace in a male dominated space. You get those 5%, and unfortunately those 5% that are against it are generally loud and very forceful about their opinions.
Yes.
They can't just be unhappy quietly.
Yeah, they're 5%, but after they finish shouting, they've made up 50. Yeah.
That's it. It's pretty much like that. But with a lot of them, I teach it a lot to my students, like to my clients and stuff as well. But it's a lot of just recognizing that if someone's going against you, it's more about them.
Yeah.
And like knowing the difference between like sexism and unconscious bias, because like so often, like being on the international stage, so from winning nationals for world skills, I went to the international level and I competed. I come fourth there, and then the year following I went over and volunteered, and the competition was in Russia. So the international competition when I competed was in Abu Dhabi, and then 2 years later it was in Russia, and I volunteered there. So I got to meet a lot of people on an international level. And just, there was this one, so one of the guys, I think he was from Latvia or something, he watched me compete. He judged me. I actually beat his competitor from his country in the mechanical competition. So he knew that I could do this kind of stuff, and I was strong. But when I was volunteering, one of the guys that was in charge, he was from Canada, and he was like, "Oh, Louise, can you just move that table for me?" And I went to move the table, and the guy from Latvia come over, and he's like, "No, you can't do that." And I'm like, "What do you mean I can't do that? It's a plastic table, like I'm moving it." And he's like, "Yeah, but..." And then he kind of like looked at me, and I was like, "You know, I'm a mechanic, right? I do like heavy, like you've seen me do it." And he's like, "Oh yeah, but women don't do that." And I was like, "What do you mean women don't do that?" And he's like, you could see his like brain was running this calculation of everything that he'd ever known in his like whole world. And I'm like, if I need help, I'll ask for it. And he's just kind of like, you can see the cogs turning. It was
Yeah.
one of those moments. And he was like, oh, so you just ask me for help if you need help. I'm like, yeah, I will. Like, you don't, just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I can't move this table. Like, you literally saw me fix an excavator. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, but it was just one of those things where pointing out that unconscious bias to him, it most of the time, if it's truly unconscious, what's happening, once you point it out to them, they change their ways. They're like, oh, actually, that makes perfect sense. And that was like probably one of the best situations I had, like the most visual situation that I've ever come across. But it can happen so subtly. Like for women, it can often be like, especially with like groundskeeping and that kind of thing, it's quite, you're exposed to customers a lot.
Yeah.
And customers tend to be the ones that are the most surprised. Your co-workers, you know, they might be surprised a little bit for the first week, but then, you know, you're working with them all the time. They're like, yeah, I know she can do it. But with customers, they're like, oh, it's so nice to see a girl doing this. Or how did you get into it? Why did you decide to do it? And you find like none of the boys are ever asked that.
No.
So it impacts the women's like ability to work because they spend the first 10 minutes explaining and justifying their existence before doing the job.
That's it's a very good way to put it, actually. Yeah, I never really thought about that.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, and it gets exhausting. Like, it's fine, we laugh about it, like, you know, but often, like, it tends to happen at the worst times. Like, you know, with, and like, learning something and doing a trade, there's like, even once you're qualified, there's so many variables. So you can have a bad day, quite, like, if something's gone wrong, like, say you've got the wrong components or the wrong stuff, you know, a customer's been really difficult, and then someone goes to you, oh, it's so nice to see a girl doing this, and you're like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
No one, like, everyone seems so surprised that I'm here. Maybe everything's like wrong with like the world and that I should leave, kind of thing. So it adds up. And the unconscious side of this, yeah, you can have the conversations over and over again. It does create change, but recognizing that it can be exhausting having these conversations over and over again.
Definitely, and I think especially over at in the UK at the moment, we are seeing like a big sort of diversity change. You know, I've now got a female student in my class as well, which is just like, you know, it's incredible. You know, just to think the movement, how what we're going to from a literally male dominated industry. Like here, there's probably about 20 sort of female greenkeepers and groundspeople that I know of, or you know, or have contact with within the UK. And when you think of how many males there is, you know, I think there was 22,000 on the last count. You know, it's just a scary difference, but we're seeing a whole change, and not just, you know, female male perspective. You know, other things like genders and sort of different backgrounds coming into the industry. It's really nice to see at the moment, because it's so positive, and they're sort of opening doors for that should be open anyway, and seeing the industry move in such a great way, and people get the opportunity to go and see and, you know, be part of these great experiences like yourself, going overseas and competing, and just being out there and talking to different people, and yeah, just opening mindsets as well. I think it's brilliant.
That's it. And I think like some of the industries that are like very heavily like on skills, like skilled industries, they allow you to travel. Like most trades and like hand skills, like labor skills, they're universal across any country. So they allow you to travel so much.
Yeah. Yeah, this is exactly why we set up what we do, because it was, yeah, there's open doors out there where you can. I spent a year in Sydney, so that, you know, it was obviously a perfect example. And then, like you say, with yourself going over to Russia and doing the championships. So, but
Yeah.
going back to a topic that we touched on a little bit earlier, so your transition into coaching and mentoring, you spoke a little bit about it, but what fully motivated you to transition, you know, your skills from the professional side of things into becoming the life coach, mentor, and the industry ambassador?
Yeah, so one thing, like it was mostly I got really annoyed at things. So like over here in Australia, the government is putting a lot of money into getting women into trades, and it's kind of, I like to say like quote unquote, it's in fashion
Yeah.
for companies to want women. And I was seeing a lot of, this is how many women we've got in our apprentice intake, you know, this is how many women are starting. But there was no graduation photos of how many women have completed,
Yeah.
or,
It's funny you
graduation
say
photos
that
of
actually,
whatever.
because me and Daryl both pointed the same thing out. So it's very interesting that you say that.
Yeah. It's a good visual to use because you see these are how many new starters we have and this many percent female and we support women. But I had so many girls coming to me at their wits' end. I'm getting bullied. There's no flexibility when they said they were going to get me flexibility. Like mums with kids
Yeah.
that they, said they're going to be able to accommodate. Um, Sexual harassment that apparently doesn't happen there, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And companies just being in denial about the issues that were happening. Um, and with people being in denial and companies in general being in denial, it doesn't allow them to come up with any solutions because there's no problems.
Yeah.
Pretending.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah. It's like mind-boggling to see, like, because I was quite young. When I became a trainer and assessor, I was 22, and I was working for quite a large company, and then had transitioned more over into that office side of things. And it just like blew my mind. I'm like, how do you guys not see the issues? I don't understand. But anyway, and I think a lot of it was like, pretend it's not there, it's not there.
Yeah.
So like by going out on my own and starting this, I really wanted to give the girls the tools and support directly. So being not attached to a company meant I could help anyone in any place. I, have a Facebook community. The girls, like, they can reach out and just send me a message. It's fully confidential, and it allows them to get the support they need without going through any barriers or having to talk to HR, because often a lot of the issues can be sorted out with a conversation. If it's unconscious bias, if it's a bit of just accommodations not being like that aren't being met, sometimes they can just be sorted out with a conversation. But if someone goes to HR saying this person's bothering me, then like HR, like human resources generally is like, so how do you want us to punish them? Are we going to sack them? It's like, no,
Yeah.
I just need some tools to help with this situation.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, and that's what I was about to say next. The natural step is, you go to the HR department and you say, human resources. I think it's awfully named wrong anyway, but you go to that department and you say, I've been having a conversation with someone and I think, they've said something which I don't completely agree with. And it's like, well, you've got two options. Either you walk out here unhappy, or we file a complaint and you walk out here unhappy because it's not what you wanted. Like you say, you want a bit of validation, or actually, a bit of, was that right? Was that wrong? What can we do next? It's not necessarily, going to nastily impact, well, not nastily, it's not going to impact anyone in a bad way, but we can potentially, go and think about the next step of what we could do and what we could say to try and prevent it happening in the future, sort of thing. So
yeah, that's it.
We're going to move on now to supporting mental health within the workplace. We know this is a big topic across the world, but it's even bigger within sports surf at the moment. And all of horticulture and ag can be a very difficult, sort of daunting industry to work in. There's long, unsociable hours. You spend a lot of time sitting on your own on a lawnmower, or even I know people that work on whole sites on their own. So everything that they do, they don't get much opportunity to even just have day-to-day conversations and just saying hi, how's your day, what's been happening, and then because of the unsociable hours, working weekends, football tournaments and golf and cricket, race courses, they spend time away from the families as well, and then the families are getting upset that they're not at home, they've got a young baby or they've got grown-up children, they don't get to spend their time and the opportunities with them. And even people that work alone, people that go and work overseas, they spend time with essentially strangers when they first meet them, and they might be living in an accommodation or something on on their own. So in the context of your coaching and mentoring network, how do you address sort of mental health challenges that tradespeople might face within their careers?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what specifically the challenge is. Like just going off what you said about some of the biggest issues within the like kind of groundskeeping area, like that isolation, it's real. It impacts us. Like we love to have someone to talk to, and it's even actually something like as an entrepreneur, like me going in my own business is something that I've started to experience as well, and did also experience as being a female in a male-dominated space as well. That kind of isolation, and that's for people who are experiencing that. It's so important to reach out to different networks that they can be a part of, reaching out within different community groups. So for me personally, I then created a Facebook community for tradeswomen and women wanting to get into the trades. So no matter where they are, what country they're in, they have people that they can connect to in that group, attending different industry events, getting out there and being as sociable as you can. You talked about, people sitting on lawnmowers for long periods of time. Like, there's going to be someone else at another site sitting on a
Yeah,
lawnmower for a long period of time. Like, you can probably, like, you can get the earmuffs that
yeah,
have, like, the speakers in them. Like, you can take advantage of the technology to be able to create those connections. Like social media and the technology that we have allows us to reach out to different people on different sites and be able to talk to them while we're doing our work. So taking advantage of what is happening if you are feeling quite isolated. And one thing, like a kind of a general overall mental health kind of suggestion I give is knowing when you need extra support and extra help. So for me, it's like, okay, if you're in a situation and you react a certain way, say if it's like, a customer coming up to you and asking you something, or, a friend saying they can't catch up on the weekend, asking yourself if you're having a reasonable reaction to the situation. Say if you're like ultimately pretty distraught, or, it's a kind of a bit, you feel like it's a bit excessive,
mm,
then that's kind of for me, it's like if you've answered that question and saying, I don't think this is a reasonable reaction to that situation, going to get support would be the next step from there. So whether it's going to a general practitioner, or, saying, hey, I'm really lonely, like I shouldn't have been this upset that this happened, but I really was craving that connection. Like,
yeah.
okay, where else can you get that connection? And going and reaching out to other resources that you have to kind of manage what's going on.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think during my apprenticeship as well, it's interesting. So we were in it was basically a two-man team, boss, apprentice. We went around the various sites, and I had a fantastic time, and I wouldn't ever change, the apprenticeship and what I did, because I did really enjoy it. I learned a lot, and we got to see a lot of different things. But one of the main reasons why I left, and particularly like towards the end, like as you say, I like because it was just the two of us and the same conversations every day in the same places, sort of on repeat. We did it for 5 years straight. I remember saying to my wife, I said, actually, like I really need to be in a team, and it was like those words that I said to her, and I couldn't really ever put my sort of finger on it, but I was like, I need to just be around other people, but more people. And because that was sort of my first experience within work, and I'd never, I've seen other people working in groups, and they're going out, they go to the bar the weekend, and they're all gathering, and, and they've got parties and various other stuff. And I was just like, well, my workplace is one person. And obviously, because of the industry it is, I'm working weekends and everything as well. So actually, any downtime that I did get, I pretty much just spent it at home. So, yeah, just
Yeah.
that move, even for me, just to go into a team and just be a part of a group and, yeah, experience different things I'd actually probably say was one of the biggest sort of silent moves ever, because it just opened up so much. And even for myself to go, right, now I've had all those experiences, and now I'm back to working on my own again, basically. And I do bits at the colleges, and I go and talk to other people, and I get to go and about. But I think that's where it's changed now. Now I know people, you've got that opportunity to text someone and say, hey, I'm passing here next week. Are you around? I'm here. Or you even just ringing someone or speaking to someone like yourself. Um,
Mm.
Whereas before at the start, like I say, because it was that sort of literally tiny environment, and I'd never been to a trade show before. I'd never joined a community on Facebook. I'd never even being a part of an organisation, sort of like an association, so to say, or anything like that. So it was literally, that was the bubble that I was in, and now I look at it and go, I've got so many corners that I could turn to. So I think that was, it's really good advice actually.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it. And one thing as well that I wanted to touch on just quickly as you're saying that is like sometimes when things don't feel right and you feel like there's something missing, sometimes you can say, "Oh, I don't like this work anymore." And it's really important that if you're in that situation, it's like, do you not like the work or the workplace or the social situation? Because they're all very different things. If you like the work but not the social kind of situation of the workplace, then you can move to a different workplace within the industry. It's not the job itself. And I see so many people that like are struggling with like say bullies or poor communication within the workplace. They're like, this whole job is not for me, and like leave the industry
yeah,
because they're in that heightened state of like fight or flight, and they can't see the difference between the actual work and the social situation.
yeah, I see that a lot as well. So it's quite interesting that you've picked up on it. Where we'll just down tools and say, you know what, this trade isn't for me. And you go, actually, well, you were thoroughly enjoying the job. Setting up the golf course and everything around it. Uh, but now you've left the industry, and it's a shame to see. And just giving people the opportunity to know that actually, if they go and apply for the job down the road and leave and move on, they might be in a better place there. So,
That's it.
how would you help people develop their technical and human skills within the workplace?
I think it's like with that, with like kind of the industries where we're in, where we learn quite a lot on the job, it's got a lot to do with communication. So being able to communicate with your supervisor or like your leading hand, the person who's teaching you, your teammates, is really, really important. That's probably one of the kind of the human skills that really allows the technical skills to come through. Because when you're communicating with the person who's teaching you, then you can absorb so much more information. You can ask questions more confidently. You can say, hey, I didn't understand that. Can you repeat it again? And you can build a really quite trusting relationship with the person, and allowing you to like, be more relaxed, have more mental space to take in information, not be so stressed or anxious, and allowing it like anxiety and stuff like that doesn't get in the way of your technical skills.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, and I think within the workplace, it's a little bit different. But my sort of outlook on things was ultimately we look after grass, and it's a plant, and there's no health or death, or no one's going to die if this grass doesn't get cut or finished. It sort of is what it is. Let's just get the job finished and then be happy. And that was sort of the way in Australia that I noticed, how they go about it. Whereas in England, we're very sort of like, no, you're here from 8 till 8, no matter what, even though you're only paid till 4 o'clock. X, Y, and Z has to be done. I'm like, well, it's a Tuesday, match is on Saturday. Like, why does it have to be done today? Sort of a thing. But we've almost created these unrealistic standards, both within the industry, but externally. You think about a Premier League sports club, and ultimately, everyone first of all go, on the best, top ever, amazing pitches, and the whole stigma that comes behind that. I think that pressure, we don't necessarily need to put on ourselves. We can go and, like I said, my big thing was, let's go out there, let's enjoy the work, let's get stuff done. Things go wrong, things happen, let's adapt to it, let's use that knowledge. Okay, we've had a poor bit of communication, something's being cut that wasn't supposed to be cut. Again, not the end of the world. We'll address it. We'll go, actually, right, okay, there's clearly an issue there, let's move on. Let's put a procedure in place where we write it on a board, for example. But just on that, trying to, that then lowers the sort of stress and any sort of worry about, have I done the right job today? Have I been doing the right things? And then that might actually tick a box within the workplace, and you like you say, actually I do really enjoy the job. It's just things that the baggage along with it, which has been causing, sort of any mental health issues, or at least the spark of it. And if we can try and take that away in the workplace, I think that's a very important thing as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And moving on to your keynote speaking and your industry ambassadorship, what are the key messages that you aim to cover during your speeches?
Yeah, so depending on who I'm speaking to, but generally the theme is like empowerment for whatever part of a person's journey that they're at. So I love talking to groups and like just taking them on a bit of a journey to show them like what I've achieved, like a bit of the challenges I've overcome. And a lot of times, depending on where the person is in their journey, if they're going through a challenge and they're like, someone else is going through a challenge, it kind of makes it a bit more normal. Like someone else has been okay after they've gone through this. Um, and kind of getting that response. So that's like that empowering is
Yeah.
like the main thing that I do with the keynote speaking. If I'm running like a workshop or something like that, where it's like on a specific topic, it's giving people realistic tools that they can literally implement straight after the workshop, whether it's like having difficult conversations with a co-worker, whether it's something they can do to support their mental health, something they can do to grow their confidence, just giving them like practical tools that they can use in their life as a tradesperson or as a skilled worker that they can implement on the go.
That's brilliant. So, if you had, for example, two different people working at different places, you got Jimmy at the golf course and Kate at a cricket club down the road, and they're both going through a similar sort of situation within their workplace, would you ever, put them in communication with each other and say, actually, I think if they were happy, obviously, would you say, this person's going through a similar sort of thing, maybe it's worth having a conversation with those about maybe ways that they're trying to address it, or maybe ways that they have addressed issues within the workplace and sort of and help them.
Yeah, so sometimes I do like directly connect people. Often I try and do it in a more subtle way where I put up like a LinkedIn post or I ask a question in my Facebook group if I know the people are in the Facebook group, like specifically about that situation, like using general terms, but it's like, has anyone ever gone through A, B, and C? And
Yeah.
then it starts a more organic conversation between them. And then they have like, even with that, there might be two people that I know that are going through it, but then say 15 people comment on the post. So it creates an even bigger kind of community or
Yeah.
support around that issue.
Oh, brilliant. So talking about those communities and things you've created online, tools for success. What are some of the insights to the tools and strategies that you do offer to people within the industry? As we mentioned, we talked a little bit about the Facebook groups and your website. Have you got anything else in the podcast?
Yeah, so I've got, so the Facebook group is called Tradeswomen Owning Their Power. It's a closed Facebook group, but you can ask to join it. In there, we just have like, check-ins, conversations, sharing wins, sharing challenging situations, to have those conversations about them. I've got, the website as well. Kind of the website's a bit more just like a bit stale, like I'm not too, not too active on the website. But I've got my podcast. I've got an episode out every week, which is generally another tool that I use. So if I'm having conversations with, say, a few people about an issue, that generally ends up being a topic that I talk about on the podcast as well. So a lot of the things that I talk about on the podcast have come from real conversations and real things that I've helped people with. So I've got that, the Facebook group. I've got one-on-one coaching as well. So if someone wanted one-on-one support from me, they can reach out and I can support them one-on-one. And then I support businesses as well, running professional development for their apprentices, their tradies and their tradeswomen. But then I also run an awareness course for like an awareness session for managers that work in a male-dominated space, and they might be starting to manage their first few females. They really want to give it their best shot, but they literally have no idea.
Yeah.
It's just like an information kind of, this is what some things that women can go through, these are some of the signs, and these are some of the ways to work through it.
So you're based in Australia, obviously. Are you able to, connect and help people across the world, or are you just an in-person, or are you online as well?
Yeah, so I love in person, but a lot of my work I do it online, really just to give accessibility to everyone. So I've got one-on-one clients that are from the US. Even Australia is a big place, so I work with people all across Australia, New Zealand. I think the main areas that my audience currently is in is like Australia, New Zealand, US, and Canada. I do have people from other areas reach out to me as well. But yeah, I really just go all over through the power of the internet.
Yeah, I certainly know that feeling. So, in terms of yourself, any sort of future goals and projects within the coaching and mentoring space, is there anything that you'd like to share with us that you're working on?
Yeah, so like my last big thing that I was working on was the podcast,
Yeah.
which has been out for like almost 3 months now. I'm up to episode 17. So that's been amazing. But at the moment, it's kind of getting everything into more corners of the world and more corners of the industry, getting these workshops out to businesses that, can really use them, can change and impact their management team, which will then impact the people that are working underneath them, getting these things into more corners of the world.
Oh, it's brilliant. No, you do great work, and I really appreciate this conversation. Just like I said earlier, I think there's just from this, there's a few things that I can take away and sort of go, actually, maybe I could think about that differently, or so it's really good. So just before we sign off, is there any little bits you'd like to touch on before we finish up?
No, I don't think there's anything. I think we covered like a lot about mental health and all that kind of stuff. But it's really important to just check in with yourself. Like, so often we like tell, like, there's "Are you okay?" day, and like asking other people if they're okay.
Yeah.
But it's really important to check in with ourselves. Have that conversation with yourself first, and be like, "Am I okay? Do I need any help or support right now?" That's a really important conversation to have.
Definitely. I think, as you mentioned earlier, just that thought process as well after a situation's happened, and you've come out of it and you think, have I reacted in a way that was in the moment, or it was, is this something afterwards that I can think about? I think that was probably one of the biggest things for me. You could sit back and sort of analyze that and go, okay, no, this was a situation where, it didn't quite go the way I wanted it to, and maybe I reacted in the way that I didn't want to as well. So perhaps that's a sign that I do need to go and then seek further help or advice or mentoring. So I think that's something brilliant to take away from the podcast. So just before we sign off, obviously we want this podcast to be more about pointing towards yourself and the opportunities that you have to talk to you and the things you work through. So we've gone over a few different topics, but very briefly, because obviously we could spend all day on each one of those topics quite easily. So we just sort of have to use this time wisely here. And I'm no expert, so like I said, I'm just learning just as much as hopefully our listeners will be as well. So Louise, where can they find more information about you, your coaching services, and any engagements, and how can they get in touch with you for any support?
Yeah, so probably the main place to get in touch with me is through my website. So www.louiseazzopardi.com. Just easy as. And then like same on LinkedIn, just as Louise Azzopardi. Feel free to connect with me there. I'm on Instagram as Louise Azzopardi Coaching. You can friend me on Facebook as well. And then there's also the Facebook group, Tradeswomen Owning Their Power.
Oh, fantastic. So we'll put some of those links in the little box at the bottom of the podcast. So make sure you check those out. Very useful resource. And I think I'll probably be having more conversations with Louise in the future, definitely. So it's been brilliant. I've really appreciated your time, Louise, and hopefully the listeners will as well. Good luck with everything that's going on, and hopefully, we might even have another conversation in the future and potentially more podcasts.
Yeah, definitely sounds good. Thanks, Brad.